oftentimes we would think after something like George Floyd that it would be an even higher percentage of people viewing this as part of a system. And if we go back to maybe a year ago, it might have been slightly higher, but that's boomerang backed a bit. And even though it's slightly over 50%, we know that there's a huge political divide. Democrats are more likely to view this as part of a systemic problem, whereas Republicans are more likely to view it as an individual isolated event. In fact, the president of the National Fraternal Order of Police said, after the Chauvin verdict, I'm looking forward to getting past this dark day in our history, suggesting that it was just one day and just one moment and not part of something that's a broader pattern. And when we talk about policing, there's a lot of discussion about bad apples, which overwhelmingly people view Derek Chauvin to be. But people have a big difference on whether or not where those bad apples come from, whether they're isolated or part of what I call a rotten tree in policing that not only impacts the system and the culture, but also spoils and poisons the good apples. That good apples cannot simply combat bad apples when they're part of a rotten system. It's going to take policy change to be able to do that. And we're seeing huge polarization between Republicans and Democrats about how to think through that. President Biden has always been a moderate. He's always been a compromiser. But I think what he's trying to articulate is that it doesn't matter if you have good people in a rotten system. And part of what happens is people make assumptions that if the system is rotten, that the people are rotten and people start to feel blamed. It's similar to living in a society that's racist and sexist. Yes, have we made improvements? Sure. But there is no woman walking down the street or being in corporate America or any type of job that would tell you that sexism doesn't still matter, even when they're around men who are for gender equality. So for some reason, we don't take that same approach when it comes to race. I also think what Biden is doing, though, he's trying to ride the line to create the kind of change he wants to see and try to get some bipartisan support. We know that Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott on the left and the right have came together along with Congresswoman Karen Bass in the House to try to figure it out. We know qualified immunity is the big sticking point, but I think based on what Senator Scott said, I think they're going to figure that out and we could have police reform relatively soon, some bipartisan police reform, at least having a group of Republicans being willing to sign on it. At the presidency, President Biden has came out forcefully in support of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which passed recently in the House of Representatives for the second time. The first time was in summer 2020, following the murder of George Floyd, and they passed that legislation on a symbolic day, on the day that would have been Tamir Rice's 18th-year-old birthday. Tamir Rice was the 12-year-old playing in a park with a toy gun with his sister in Cleveland, ended up being shot in less than 3 seconds by a police officer who, if we had some federal databases and a state database, would have never even been in a position to kill Tamir Rice. So we see these patterns playing out. The big thing, though, is Biden is not only thinking about legislation, he's also thinking about consent decrees. And we know that the Senate has yet to vote on some of his key selections for the Department of Justice. And part of that, it is about race. It's about probably also gender as well, as we're talking about 2 women of color trying to get approved for that. And the reason why, and this is the reason why starting the investigations in the city of Minneapolis and the city of Louisville are important. It's because not only do they have long track records, but I'm pretty sure that there has been complaints from those cities, probably not just in terms of use of force incidents, but probably also from police officers in those cities about misconduct that were not investigated under the Trump administration. The Trump administration handed down 0 consent decrees. He made it very clear at the beginning of his administration that he was not going to investigate or harm what's happening with law enforcement agencies at the local level. I think there was a dog whistle, and not even a dog whistle, but a direct bullhorn to law enforcement that they would have free reign to do what they wanted to do. Biden is trying to pull that back in, and law enforcement knows that consent decrees is some of the main ways that change is made in local communities. We saw that with Ferguson, we saw that with Camden, we've seen that with other police departments. And so part of it moving forward is Biden trying to ride that line to figure out how he can get police reform passed in Congress and how he can also get his selections in place, his appointments, and then also how they can start these investigations in cities to try to create change.